Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Awaken the World. My name is Garen, for those who don't know me, and today we're going to be talking about spiritual crisis versus mental illness. And I have a background in psychology, and I can tell you, I keep a partial glance at the psychology journals to see how things are progressing in psychiatry and the like. More from a spiritual point of view, more from what I know and seeing what changes are coming to reflect that in those disciplines. And in the area of psychology and psychiatry, there are professionals who are starting to wake up now and understand that there is actually a difference between a spiritual crisis and a mental health issue. And we're going to talk about some of those things today and get some clarification. Before I go any further with this, though, this is not something to mess around with. If it is not specifically following this spiritual crisis framework, there may be some mental illness. And let's understand what mental illness is, okay? Mental illness is a label that we place on anybody who exhibits differences in their behavior or thought processes or usually it comes out in behavior, okay, that doesn't really seem to fit with the whole, and we claim them to be mentally ill. And if we look into history, most of the greatest figures in history would be considered mentally ill. Right from Leonardo da Vinci through to Michelangelo. I mean, the list goes on. And if you look back, more and more we're realizing that, yeah, okay, today we would have called that mental illness. And is it really mental illness? You know, we could look at someone like Gandhi, for example, and the reason I use Gandhi is I have immense respect for what that man did. And we're not going to argue what sort of a man he was because, of course, everyone has their detractors. But at the end of the day, okay, he would have fit the bill of someone who was mentally ill in comparison to what the rest of society viewed reality as. And we have to be very careful with that. Spiritual crisis, okay, here's the real difference. Spiritual crisis is precipitated by a belief-changing event in our lives. It can appear to strike out of the blue. One minute you're blissfully going along in your existence and wham, it's the baseball bat to the back of the head. Life has knocked you flat. There'll be a heavy loss involved. Our existence will appear to have been turned completely upside down. We'll have lost a friend. We'll have taken on an extreme illness or a debilitating disease or something to this effect. And from a mental health standpoint, it may appear that it's actually an emotional crisis going on. And it's our inability to adapt to the experience. That's what's really happening. It's that ego pushing up against that experience, that false identity and false identification with the various items that are being torn or being perceived as being torn out of its existence. The reason it's very difficult to tell the difference between spiritual crisis and mental health issue is that what's happening inside of us is actually beyond words. And the words that we would use to describe an illness to somebody, for example, just won't work. The only thing we can even come close to is emotive words, is words that speak of emotion. We can talk about the way we think we're feeling, but it can be very confusing. So let's be clear. If there is not a mitigating, life-changing event, we must look very closely to see whether there is a little bit of a mental illness issue. And mental illness, we have to be so careful with that word, okay? I'm considered mentally ill. Why? Because I have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And in the past years and years and years and years ago, it has been severe. I can't say that it's severe anymore, although I can tell you that in certain situations, the PTSD acts as a over amplification. It allows the over dramatization of what's going on in related to what my ego has connected to a past event during wartime. And once you can become cognizantly aware of that, you can begin to deal with it from that same conscious awareness point of view. You know, there's a lot of programs out there for PTSD. Speaking of PTSD, and this fits right in line with spiritual crisis and mental health issues, okay? And anyone who is experiencing PTSD, yin yoga. Yin yoga is being incorporated into healthcare centers across the US, and slowly, more and more, we're catching up here in Canada as well. You know, the one thing about the United States and the medical system, I mean, Johns Hopkins University is bar none probably the best medical facility as far as research goes on the planet. These people have come to understand at that level that indeed yoga and yin yoga, which is a very, very peaceful yoga designed to help release what's inside of you, okay? Yin yoga is proven to help people make leaps and bounds. So if PTSD is one of your issues, I really suggest you look into yoga of any sort. And I can tell you as a long-term practitioner, yoga has made amazing differences in my life, and we're going to speak about yoga one day as well. So in recognizing whether there's a mental health event underway or spiritual crisis, we must first look at the precipitating event, okay? Spiritual crisis always involves loss. It always involves something that is seen as stripping away a big piece of our identity, whether it's a family member we lose, a loved one, like I said, a disease, illness, a bad accident, whatever the case may be. Our existence appears to have been turned totally upside down. Even though this is the false identity of ego, that false sense of I, that doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt, because that false identification we have, we're unconscious in that false identification. And to us, it hurts. The pain we feel within can also precipitate the purging and the release of pent-up emotions, repressed emotive energy. If you've been in an abusive relationship where you've taken it on the chin year after year after year, either emotionally or spiritually or mentally or even physically, when you have one of these big precipitating events, it can cause a huge release of all that pain body. And pain body is a term that Eckhart Tolle uses, and I really do like the term. Because when we say pain body, we can understand that it is an energy imprint within the body. Again, it is not us. It is a collective energy imprint, and it is formed due to our thoughts again, and our perceptions, which are our thoughts and what we feel about our thoughts. And then we place those on the object or thing externally to us. If you haven't seen the video on thoughts and perceptions, give it a watch. It'll help clarify that point. Consequently, if we have one of these big emotive releases going on at the same time, we have to remain on guard for depression and for withdrawing from the social circles we're in. And this can occur at a spiritual crisis level too, where we withdraw from our normal social circles. And the reasoning is different. And we must really watch for this, because if it is a mental health issue, it'll begin to spiral down. There is a very definitive way to understand the difference, and that is a spiritual crisis is a growth event. It is progressive and evolving in nature. In an emotional crisis, when there's possibly a mental health event going on, when we've allowed ourselves to fall into a downward spiral of anger and depression and a lack of self-worth, our evolution is backwards. It's a devolution. We devolve backwards. We grow more unconscious as we fall into unconsciousness. The unconsciousness trap. And in deep, deep unconsciousness, the ego, in its feelings of loss and separation and loss of identity to itself, can literally begin to break and manifest as what we would call mental illness. It's very important to know the difference. If the person is, if you can see that the person is progressing, they're evolving upwards, it is definitely spiritual crisis, and they can be helped through that dark night of the soul. They really can. There's a great video on it, on the dark night of the soul. It's a Sunday talk, and it's titled that as well. Another good watch. And if the person is devolving or growing deeper into depression and not growing upwards out of it, instead of examining our belief systems and our roles that we play, which is what a spiritual crisis causes, instead our vision will be stuck in reverse. We'll be clinging to the old situations. We'll be clinging to our old identities. We'll be clinging to the way things were. And in that, it is more of a mental health issue. And when we say mental health or mental illness, I really want to clarify this. The stigma that is attached to that is insane, okay? We live in an insane society that thinks it's sane. Look around you. Look at the things that we do. We wholesale destroy this planet. We wholesale destroy ourselves. We fill our bodies with chemicals and foods that have no right to be labeled as food. And we do all these things and we think we're sane. We are insane as an egoic species, as a species in the grasp of ego still at the level of unconsciousness we're at. We're all a little nuts. It's okay. Don't beat yourself up about it. I don't. As a matter of fact, these days when someone says I'm crazy, I take that as the best compliment at all. Because I look around to the rest of the people that I realize are quite insane in their unconscious actions and behaviors, and I think to myself, well, if that's sanity, I'll stick with the crazies. Embrace it. You might as well. Embrace it. If you are in a state of depression and you feel the depths of sadness and you are willing to come to terms with yourself and understand that you are spiraling downward, that can be turned around. Medication is a personal choice. I personally don't believe in it. I don't really think it's necessary except in extreme cases. For the most part, for most people, it is your life situation and how you view your life situation that is causing that mental instability, that mental health issue. And if that's where you are today, my heart goes out to you. I've been there myself. I understand this. I really do. I know what it means to feel like you're not a man anymore. I know what it means to feel like you can't do the things that everyone thinks you should do in order to define yourself as a man. And I also understand the feminine side of it. I see firsthand in my wife trying to struggle with her over-identification with the role of mother and not being able to let go of the concept of my kids, like she somehow owns them. Our children are not our children. Our children are powerful spiritual beings who we have had the honor and pleasure of birthing into this world and given them just the right amount of knowledge and wisdom to forge their own path in openness and honesty with themselves and in their own personal power. Our responsibility ends. In all of nature, nothing, no creature keeps the young with them their entire lives. Now, that doesn't mean our young won't flow in and out of our lives or sometimes come back into our lives and even live in our homes. That doesn't mean those sort of things. What it means is you have to take the idea off that it's mine. They're my children, my car, my house. It is this my that causes all the mental health issues. I hope this video has been very helpful. When it comes to spiritual crisis is an upward progression. It can still be difficult. It can still feel like it's tearing you apart, but you're always moving toward the light. Where in mental crisis, when there is a mental health issue that must be addressed through counseling or through a course like I offer, and it works for spiritual crisis as well. Let's just be clear about that. If we see that we're spiraling downward, we have to realize where we're going. We have to catch ourselves. We have to say, wait a minute, our entire being is screaming out to me that I am on the wrong path. Remember, all those negative feelings coming up, they deserve no more attention and all the attention that they need. And that attention is to realize that they are the body's intelligence system speaking to you, the ego. You see, it's not your body. It never was your body. That which you truly are, your higher self, manifests a vessel within the physical realm, and it manifests that vessel within itself. It takes a very small, tiny piece of itself and it lowers that vibrational energy down to the point where that vibration can actually materialize as that very coarse energy into the material realm. And that's what we are. We are not solid objects. We are vibration. We're going to talk about this issue a little more in some upcoming videos as well, but we're going to leave it here for today. I hope this has been helpful. My love to you all, and namaste, of course. We'll see you soon.